new beat to your drum. Achieve success with Global.Media.com. And celebrate it with or without champagne or...
Yay! Here we are.
Hallelujah! What
Yeah.
an afternoon, morning for you guys, or evening it has been so far. You see, I always joke about this. Never work with technology, animals, or children live.
Or with any.
Or with any life. And yet we go through that craziness, that rigmarole, of things don't always go according to plan. That being said, I am so pleased to be here with you all today. Emmy, how are you doing? How is life for you?
Life is good today. Okay, we're live on LinkedIn now, so that's all right.
Yes, we're live. We're live on LinkedIn Live and I'm getting messages. Because I'm getting messages saying, "Where are you?"
Yeah, we're here. We're here.
So apologies. We are, like I said, technology. You have no control. It just does its thing, right?
Our health issues haven't helped, right?
Is that for both of us? No, this is live. We're not going there.
Okay, fine.
So the fact that we're so late into this means that this is going to be quite a short one because I have got to go.
Well, what time are you going? I mean, you never do when you say so.
But I need to be out of here by 3:15. BST at the latest, which gives you roughly about 45 minutes with me this afternoon. I'm really sorry, folks. I would like to continue this as part 2 if we don't get through the whole discussion and topic. So let me begin by welcoming you and saying thank you so much for those who have patiently waited around or returned. I want to say thank you so much. I truly appreciate you. I truly appreciate you being here, supporting us, jumping on our calls at any time and so on and so forth, despite your busy schedule. So we don't take you for granted whatsoever. And we are so glad that you are here and we thank you for your continuous support. And I hope those who are watching on LinkedIn, sorry, not LinkedIn, on YouTube, are also.
I'm one of those. I'm one of those watching on YouTube, so that's why that's what I remembered.
So those watching on YouTube, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for following us, and thank you for choosing rather to spend your time with us, other than being anywhere else. Let's kick off this.
If you're on YouTube, like and comment on today's video, and then subscribe to my channel if you're here.
Yes.
Always do that.
Yes. And invite others to watch this program. So, as usual, do you know any? I have found in the past few weeks that I've had topics that I want to discuss. And then what happens is I either have a phone call, a conversation, a ladies' lunch, and a different topic crops up, completely different topic. And as you know, this topic wasn't unearthed until 2 a.m. this morning. 2 a.m. this morning. So it's something that I think has been long-standing. I've had so many perspectives, so many views, both from mother and daughters, about this particular topic for today. So if you're just joining us, the topic for today is firstborns. So firstborn daughters and mothers, the relationship, the trauma, culture, and generational trauma that happens. Now, I know when I mentioned this, and you mentioned the topic of womb trauma. I'm going to save that for our next topic, titled Miscarriage, Aggression, leading into violence and resulting into miscarriage or baby loss. So the womb trauma discussion we're going to table, because if we begin that today, we're not going to leave our quarter past. I need to leave our quarter past today.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's the hour today. So during a lunch,
Hold on. Let me welcome Lisa the genius. Now she's the
Hi,
genius indeed.
Lisa.
Hello, glad you're here.
Welcome.
Michelle B, thanks for joining us as well. I don't know
Hi.
why you're not showing on my YouTube, Michelle, even though I can see you clearly on YouTube. I'm on YouTube too. So the number should be at least two, right? I don't understand what's going on, but it's fine.
Hi,
Yeah,
Lisa.
it's.
Thank you for being here. It's awesome to
I
see
think
you and
there
Michelle.
is. I think there's a bigger question that you're asking, Christiana, which is how do we choose our topics, right?
Yes.
That is the question. You see, I've got a whole list of topics. Whenever I have an idea, whether it's from one of my clients' experience or what, something like
Thank
that,
you, Lisa.
so I will write it down. I send myself a WhatsApp message. I got a whole list
I
of
do.
them. And when
Same
it comes to
here.
my, I just literally choose one from those. I don't, I go with the one that I feel to talk about that day. Now, some ideas on the start that morning, like you say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
And it,
as you know, when this show began as a LinkedIn audio, which is what was
mm,
back in the day, I used to be able to have my topics done 2 weeks or a week in advance, at least a week
mm,
in advance. But that was me wanting to get a show out.
mm.
I know me as a human being. I tend to go with my gut instincts. And that's the reason why sometimes it seems like my shows are last minute. It's not because they are necessarily last minute. I have topics to discuss, but I sometimes base on what's happened or what conversations I've had in that week. And in this occasion, on this occasion, literally a day ago, that happened. And if you imagine if we'd gone out to talk about this topic, I'll be changing it again last minute, saying we're having a conversation about this today. So we'd have to change the whole flyer, the whole poster.
Mm,
And what I've learned from that is, I know it seems last minute, but everything or the topics I get that what seems like last minute happens for a reason. You know, I will give you an example. When I spoke about the topic of men, that topic on that week was changed. I should have had something else, but I changed it into men. And I know the amount of messages I received in my DM to say, hey, I am so glad you spoke about this because I was thinking X, Y, and Z. You know, I really get to understand. I really got to really appreciate you discussing this on the day you did. It was meant to be,
mm,
and those people don't always jump on the call or are not our audience. But you know that they are watching or they've watched without making themselves known that they are watching, but they will
mm,
DM me. So I've learned that best laid plans and all. I don't always um, begin with a topic or end up doing the topics that I've written out to do in the first place. So, in the long-winded way of saying, I go with my gut instincts, and sometimes last minute isn't necessarily, ridiculous. That being said, let me apologize for our technical issues that we had earlier on today. Earlier on today, so I could hear Annie, and Annie could not hear me because my laptop had a mind of its own. I've had to reboot my system twice to be here. So thank you for your patience, guys. Now on to today's topic. I agree, Michelle. So many don't talk about it, and that's why we have to talk about these things, right? So today's topic is about it came about because I had lunch with a friend of mine this week, and I was she's a fairly new friend, and it so happens that she was going through. It took one question for us to open up the can of worms, which is first daughters, culture, trauma, generational culture, and how it plays out in our lives and how it plays out as we grow and develop from from children right through to adulthood for some of us, and it really got me thinking. I know I speak about miscarriage and baby loss. This is what this platform is about. But here is something that does happen and how we carry so much in the womb area. And I'm not going to touch on womb trauma today because it's a different it's a different ball game. 2 weeks time we'll have a conversation, but it has an impact. And as women, we carry so much, you know, in our womb area. That includes trauma. And so when we were speaking about what she had experienced to my experience and other experiences, it was like, wow, here I am speaking to somebody new, and they are telling me what they've experienced from their childhood right through to their teens, and how they overcame, or how they put measures and things in place to protect themselves, to set boundaries, and to be able to live a normal life without the trauma having such a huge impact. It still has an impact, you know, and they were honest enough in saying it still has an impact. These are the ways in which it has an impact or it manifests itself. So without further ado, let me just say this first of all before we pack into it. Did you know that nearly 70% of people, let me repeat that number, 70% of people worldwide have experienced at least one traumatic event in their lifetime, right? It's generic. Like I'm speaking what first of all generically. Imagine someone that you might not, and almost like one in four, or I'd say one in six, that would have gone through some kind of trauma in their life, whether from childhood or as an adult or as a teenager, and it has an impact. So most of us are walking around with some traumatic experience, right? Whether that looks like when I meet somebody, I don't trust them from the offset, I'm guarded. That's a trauma in itself. That comes from somewhere. You have to ask the question: the behaviors that we display, what lies beneath those behaviors? What are the root causes for the behavior that human beings display? And 70% of that is trauma, you know. But what's more surprising is that we don't, and most of us don't talk about our experiences, right? It can be passed down. So the traumas we experience, we end up passing it down to our children, right? Without intentionally wanting to, for some, or it's done vicariously without us realizing that that's what's happening. And we really sometimes have to go into, some of us have to go through, some people have to go through therapy to really get to understand their trauma and how that manifests, itself. Michelle is saying she passed down her trauma to her children. And trauma comes in different shapes and sizes. I would be interested in knowing what how Michelle passed hers down, but also how do her children manifest her trauma, you know? And yes, I do agree, therapy does work wonders. So it was really having this discussion that I got to thinking maybe we are unaware of how we pass trauma down. But here is the thing: is the mother and first daughter's trauma that drew my attention. And the reason is because I'm a first daughter. you know my friend's a first daughter, some of us are first daughters, and I can speak from an African perspective. As first daughters, there is this responsibility that you automatically inherit, and it's known as inheritance trauma or inheritance, ultimately. And so you don't think of it as a child growing up. It's like everything seems normal to you until you start to have conversations with others, and you realize that actually my experience is not unique. So in my case, and in my friend's case, I'm echoing. Michael, can you mute yourself, please, if your microphone is on? So in my case, it was really understanding, the dynamics, and understanding what that meant and why that was the case, and so on and so forth. But people don't stop and think about it, because as childhood, you grow how you grow, you're raised how you're raised. It is not until you start to have conversations that you begin to realize, actually, I'm not, by myself. I'm not alone. If she's saying that, then we have similarities. And with my friend, there were similarities in the conversations that I heard other women, say, and from a mother and a daughter perspective. You know, this itself is known as intergenerational trauma, right? I'm all for listing things and labeling them because we get to understand them even better. And when you can label something, you can get to understand it and make the choice to drop it, move forward, or find ways and measures to cope or deal with if you're choosing not to drop. Okay, so Michelle is saying that that makes complete sense. Every trauma is passed down if you think about it. Yes, it is, from generation to generation. And so in many cultures, the firstborn daughter isn't just a child. She really isn't. Why? Because she becomes the second mother. And I know certainly in our cultures, in my culture, you become the second mother, you know. And I can say that I'm the first of six. Being the first of six and being the first of many children, you almost are given or passed down that role without necessarily thinking of what that means. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's a wrong and a right here. I'm just speaking on exactly what that means and how that manifests itself, you know. And the most overlooked carriers of that trauma are first daughters, because when you're a mother, you have your first child, right? Your first child is, I guess I call it the training wheels. It's almost like a child who's learning to ride a bike. Okay, they're on training wheels until they grow the confidence to be able to remove that training wheels. And therefore, as a firstborn, everything your parents are going to learn, you are their whole. Let me be blunt about it. You're the guinea pig, right? Because all of the experiments and all of the the questions, the doubts, the isms, the this, that, and the other, it's all hinged on that first child. It's not till the second child comes along and they get to understand, okay, I did this way, I did that this way. Let me try something different. Let me see what happens if I do something different. So automatically, as first daughters, you experiment on your first child, and so you're the one who ends up carrying sometimes the burden, okay? And sometimes that burden becomes traumatic in itself, depending on your experience and depending on, so for some people, their childhood, how they grew up, what they experienced, what they saw, what they were exposed to. Nonetheless, it still remains that the first daughter still carries that burden. Is that Bironka I can see? Oh my goodness, welcome. We mentioned her earlier on today. Welcome. It's so good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Oh my goodness. Awesome. You picked a great topic to join us today, huh?
Yes, I was just I just saw the link and I just thought to stop by for about 5 minutes before I zoom out again.
Okay. So in that case, I'm going to give you the floor. If you're going to be 5 minutes, please have the floor. Join us. What's your thoughts on this topic?
Okay, I saw the topic and I saw that it's miscarriage and baby loss. And because I had gone through this some decades ago, it got me curious to come in and hear what's being said. I didn't have my first son until about 7 years into my marriage, but before then, I'd had series of miscarriages and the loss of a first child before then. So it's this is also familiar to me, which was why I decided to stop by. And till date, I don't think anyone ever lives down the trauma of losing a child, even if the child is just a few hours old. I don't think anyone ever loses the trauma. Mentally, I still picture who she would have been, at what stage she would have been at. Would I have become a grandmother by now? You know, would she be married by now? What would she be doing as a career or business? And every year on her birthday, I still, you know, think and imagine what things could have been. So I know that this is not something that goes away. At some point, yes, you'll manage to push it to the recess of your mind, but it's still there because it was a part of you. It's still there. So for me, what I say is don't hurry through the process. Just give yourself time. It takes time. Give yourself time. You don't have to fit into the mold of anyone about how you do your grieving or how you handle the hurt. Just give yourself time to go through the process and look forward to other things that bring you joy.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for your share.
Thank you.
Let me firstly say, I'm so sorry for your losses. You know,
Thank you.
I appreciate you being honest, open with us here and vulnerable enough to come and share with us. The one of losses is something that you, and I do agree with you, you never forget it. It is traumatic. And you go on because in the work I do in this space, sometimes I get to hear things like, oh, you recover or you heal. There's no recovery, right? We build ourselves and find ways in being able to cope and move forward because we still have our triggers. The dates are triggers, you know, the scent and smell and your thought, and what you said was spot on. You'll always be wondering, what if they were like this, or how would they have been, or would they have been like their friends, their schooling, you know, their career? Who would they have been as an individual, as a person, both from as a child to, you know, teens to adults? You have those thoughts in your mind. You wonder, especially when you go on to have other children and you see the characteristics of other children. It really does get you thinking, and you cannot help but to wonder. It does not mean that you fall apart. It just means that you are holding those lost ones in memory and holding them dear. So I want to thank you for sharing. The one thing we're talking about today, and usually we speak about, you know, loss and miscarriage and baby loss. Today's topic is one that is slightly out of what we speak about, and it's about first daughters and mothers, and the relationship between first daughters and mothers from a cultural, generational trauma perspective. You know, in the experiences that we have, sometimes we have mothers who really get on with their, you know, first daughters and with their daughters, and sometimes you have mothers who clash with their first daughters, and sometimes they see themselves in that daughter. Perhaps that daughter is moving too fast, or perhaps they carry an element of fear that they've experienced, and that is projected onto the child that they are raising, or onto that first daughter. You know, and as Michelle put it, and I'm so glad that Lisa made a good point. She says she's the first of 7, so she truly understands what we are speaking about today. Goodness me, that's she picked me by 1. I'm the first of 6 and she's the first of 7. Yay! Thank you, Lisa. So I'm so glad that you understand and appreciate what this conversation is all about. And researchers call this the parentification, right? So when you as a first daughter, you become a second parent, it's a parentification of your daughter. And imagine like being an 8-year-old who acts like a 30-year-old in responsibilities and in the responsibilities that they inherit. And then that moves on to experiencing different traumas. It's until you have lived it, for some, until you've lived it, until you've experienced it, you will sometimes struggle. People sometimes struggle to understand what that really means and what that looks like and how it shows.
Is it me or have we lost Christiana's sound?
We lost your
Mike,
sound. I can't
we
hear
lost
her.
your sound, Christiana. We lost your sound. Because I can't hear you. No, you were
No, I
doing
can't
so
hear you.
well. It's those headphones. I keep telling you, those headphones are a curse. I'm not a fan of headphones at all. I can hear Michael.
I can't.
No,
Did you lose your voice,
no.
Christiana?
I tell you. You're
Yeah,
just
I can hear
miming.
you. I can
You're
hear you
miming.
speaking and mining and all that. So
This is why we didn't go live earlier, my friend. See, you know, the tech was always playing up, right?
Can you
What's
unplug? Can you unplug your
yeah?
headphones?
Unplug the headphones and start, and let's try that. But she's frozen now. No, so I'm not frozen, so she's frozen.
It's most probably the computer.
Try again. No, we still can't hear you.
Restart the computer and come back in again. Any will do his best to keep the audience occupied.
Yeah, might as well, right? You know.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you're ready, you know, so, you know, to start speaking, then we'll happily come back to you. You know, Michelle, I know you can't hear. I know you can't. So Mike and I realized suddenly the sound disappeared. You know, this is what was happening. This is why we started late, because we are literally having a proper problem about this, which is cool. So Bafemi, welcome. So glad you're here. Says hello, everyone. Look, I'm not a daughter, right? So you know, but I think there's a truth in our parenting abilities when we have our first child. You know, and I guess you know, I'm a dad of, so I got 3 kids, and I can say the first 2 we royally screwed up. No, not because we wanted to. You know, it is the same. That's what I'm saying, Michelle. No, it's the same for men, really. You know, so because no one teaches you how to be a parent, right? And so I do understand that you do. You know, you tend to replicate what you learned as a kid, what your parents did to you, right? Lisa, there's no dancing to entertain you. You have to listen to my voice. Don't fall asleep, right? That's all I can say, right? Look, I know,
I can intervene here, Annie.
Yeah, please feel free.
With respect to family structure, mine is kind of a little awkward. I am the first on my father's side. From my father, I'm the first child of all the children that he's had. Then his second wife, or maybe his first wife, I'm not so clear about that, who I consider to be my stepmom, started off by providing him with twins. And those are the first girls. The one that came out first, bright, intelligent, very focused. The one that came out second, more of a jock, very sporty, not nerdy, extremely, out there, very social. So we've got like twins. She's got 2 daughters who you can consider to be the first. They're not separate, but the way she brought them up, from the results, what I can see, was not very good, because at this particular junction, both of them are not talking to her. It's difficult. What she was trying to entrench in them, and that's because of the way she was brought up. in the village with our grandmama. And I think even with them, in her, and I have to dig into this a little bit more, but I think this is a little bit complicated when they're in her life as well. But the trauma, she was definitely transferring to the two eldest ones and the daughters, or to the eldest in the families. That's including me, not just them, but including me. When I was around, I was considered to be the eldest, and so I was subject to the same kind of treatment. It was not pretty, and it's not something. It's different, and it's kind of like that's where you're running into. Now they both her and my dad decided to give us a Western education, all of us. And in the Western system, children are treated differently. And we lapped it up. We really enjoyed being in that system. Coming back home, we really hated coming back home because, they'll send us to boarding school and then we'd come back and then send us back to boarding school, etc. So to the extent my sister confessed that she preferred to be in boarding school than to come back home, she actually begged for that to happen. I was like, what? When did you do this? Because she was struggling with this for quite a while. And it has come to a boil, and she's still trying to deal with that trauma. And I guess I need to really sit down with her and talk to her and really ask her to look at it from, her mom's side, and understand that her mom coming from a place where these kinds of conversations were not common, the ones that we're having right now. They did not occur then. They can occur now, and she can initiate it and hash it out with her mom, so that we can, within our family, we can have a huge problem resolved. Huge. I mean, I'm talking about one of her sister, the twin sister, actually divorced the family. She doesn't want to talk to any of us, except for probably the little ones. But that's the first time I've ever heard of a child actually divorcing a family. It was within my family. You can actually do that, and she did it. Wow.
No, look, it may be that there is something unique about mothers and first daughters. I don't know. I have no personal experience.
Oh, Annie, I agree with you there. There is certainly something very unique about it. And I walk in this territory with trepidation.
So you should. So you should, a daughter. Look, parenting is essentially, like I say, replicating the experiences that we experience. Like if your parents beat you when you were a baby, when you were a kid, then you seem to believe that is the way to raise kids. If your parents were laissez-faire, then again you replicate that behavior. I think that's a unique problem in itself, right? That's we need to learn better parenting. But I think mothers have a unique role in this whole system. It is a system, right?
Right.
I was in a room with Curtis, and he was talking about how mothers pass on the trauma to all their kids, not just the first ones. The mothers. And I agreed with him. Saying there's a fundamental issue, which I think is yes, this issue of mothers and first daughters is not talked about. I think the role of mothers in traumatizing the kids is not talked about at all. Because mothers they'll make their sons odd based on their experience of relationships. So there's the one with the child's father, or the one with the other partners.
Mm-hmm.
or even their dad. So it ends up being, a toxic environment for everyone because everyone must live with mom's pain,
It
mom's
is
trauma.
right. And guess what? She's having to deal with it alone most of the time because the other person, the the male figure, is out, has to go out
Mm,
and work, has to be the
mm.
breadwinner, has to succeed in that category.
See,
When the
you
chips
see,
are down, that's where he needs to be at.
Michael. So when that's the case, the mothers tend to take their trauma out on their sons
Uh-huh.
because the son now becomes a representation of the father. Now,
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm looking at Rosemary. I'm gonna welcome you, the positivity B. So glad you're here. Michelle says that's how it usually works. I hear you. And so Obafemi says in Nigeria, in Africa, Nigeria, the first daughter is like a mother, which should be highly respected, especially if the mother is dead. Takes responsibility for the younger ones, even when she grows up. She still supports the younger ones. That seems like a unique situation, but I'm sure it's not unique, right?
It's not unique.
Right.
It's within the continent. It's very pernicious. And
Yeah.
not only that, but it's not talked about. There are
Mm.
feelings there, and there are they're essentially children who have to grow up extremely fast. I mean,
You
an
see,
8-year-old can be can be the mother of all the other kids. An 8-year-old.
when Christiana was talk about this topic, and but she wants to come at it from the culture side, right? The cultural side.
Mm-hmm.
That's which I think
And that's
is
this is where we're traversing. Mm-hmm.
is a challenging place to be because now that's saying black people have their own different ways and different traumas. That's what the culture thing means to me anyway.
But it's absolutely true. What you've made, that statement is absolutely true. We do have our different ways. We do have our traumas, and there are multiple traumas, not just single.
Are they different from white people's traumas, Michael?
To an extent, it is not. But the gravity, yes.
Well, in terms of impact, in terms of the destructive impact that we're still feeling today,
Mm-hmm.
it's still there, is what you're saying.
It's still there, and it's carried on. But white people also have the same thing. I'm pretty sure in poor white families, that's common. But also in rich white families, that can also be common. Because you could have an abusive father and an abusive mother. You could find those traumas there too. The way they deal with them, communities have banded together, kind of. White communities have banded together to deal with those situations. African communities, we don't talk about these things. We tend to, just go with the flow because there are more important issues we tend to think there are more important issues to resolve. And really, that is true. The more important issue is poverty. That is what we have to resolve. And so we ignore everything else until we can, because this is a big matter. We ignore that particular aspect with the daughters. And rightly so, Christiana is bringing it up because it is in our future, in our near coming future, this is going to become a huge impediment to boys and women actually seeing eye to eye. Because we're going to be dealing with traumas. And those traumas that have been passed on to us by our mothers. And we are not aware of them. And our mothers are not aware.
I think we're aware of them. We just don't call it out. And I say, I mean, like I say, when I was in Curtis's room, So Lisa was there as well, I believe. It's only a few weeks ago, and literally, I was like, "No," I said, "I see it." We pass on, our mothers pass on their pain to the sons, especially,
Mm-hmm.
and then the sons obviously pass that on to in their relationship to their kids.
Yes.
And now that's why we're in trouble half the time. But we wouldn't admit this as
Yeah.
a culture.
But here's the thing
We
is
need
that
to.
the silence is killing us.
Yes, literally. Look, so as Michelle says, I believe it's harder for mothers and daughters because of hormones. Maybe. But I think it's an issue for all.
The injection of hormones is another aspect of this, an other aspect of this. There is also a psychological aspect of this, and there needs to be we need to know what the differences are. We don't talk about these things.
So Michelle says, I went through that and I did way better at boarding school than around the women in my house. Your mother, Michelle, that's the one, right? And Michelle says,
Mm-hmm.
we'll do pass it on to all of our kids. And that's my point, Michelle. It is that we'll pass on to all of our kids, not just the first daughter. Yes, first daughter has a unique place and unique responsibilities. I agree, but then the first son does too, right? Saying
Mm-hmm.
I'm the first son. I'm the only son amongst my sisters, and I guess I'll say this now. The
That makes you
day
the first son.
the day we got the call to say, "Oh, your dad has died," I'm like, okay. That day I became king. Right. I'm saying that's the day that's how it tends to work. First sons have their own responsibilities. I'm sure as you know, Michael, right?
Yeah.
We are with the head of the household, even whatever age you are.
Yes.
So I agree. I say the first daughter has caregiving and those sort of things on the
Responsibilities. Yes.
responsibility. Whereas now the first son's responsibilities is to make sure everyone is okay, at least financially, and also protected.
Yeah.
So that's a different sort of bucket that's the men have to take with them.
Mm-hmm.
Christiana's back
The
at
roles have to
last.
be played out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Chris, welcome. Quick hello from Chris. I'm glad you're here. Christiana found her way back eventually. It's been a while. I say again. I say okay. Let me do Michelle's first. And Michelle says definitely nowadays kids have to grow up so quickly. They do. It's I mean that's a good and bad thing. I don't. It's a good and bad thing. The sooner we realize our responsibilities, the sooner we realize the need to find a purpose, the sooner we find happiness. No, we can't hear you, Christiana. Use your phone. You're gonna have to use your phone, Christiana. So, but Femi says, I've seen first daughters or sons who have to drop out of school to work. Yeah, so the younger ones can be sent through school. Indeed, that's my point. I say it can happen to daughters and also to sons as well. So I hear you, Femi. I think I'm with you entirely.
It derails our growing up. It totally derails it. Just all of a sudden, the responsibility has become, you become an adult instantaneously.
Yeah. So you should. I got a 16-year-old who seems to think that yes, he's because we've worked through our traumas on our first two kids. So he's our third kid, right? So he's got the life of Riley. He's got a good life. He's as happy as can be, but he's a good kid too, right? But deep down, I wish he would grow up. He's 16. I'm saying get on with it. It's time to focus, to knuckle down.
But here's the most interesting part is that he's becoming you want him to become an adult. Yes, almost right away, but without the powers of an adult.
What do you mean without the powers? Of course he has the powers. Yeah, he has dominion. He can decide what he wants to do on any given day.
I know, but then you can override whatever he says at any time, any given time. He doesn't have all powers. You override him.
Here's the point, Michael. At 16, I moved out of home. I never went back home ever again. I moved out into my own place, into my bedsit land. I did my A levels, my bedsit land. I'm saying we can't keep mummifying our children. I don't like it. I just don't like it at all. I don't like babying our children. Now, by 16, you have to have a clear plan. You have to know where you're going and where to focus on. I'm not into playing like you're a kid.
That was your experience, Annie.
No,
Exactly.
but that's not a trauma. That's a reality. You know, here's why I say this. I mean, you say it's my experience. I look at my friends tell me often, you saw today when we were kids. I'm like, I did. I realized from then I had to be I couldn't just be a kid. I had to be an adult in my own life. I'm saying, but you lot didn't see it. That's why you lot are still there poor, you know, and desperate now. Because now I've done what I had to do. Now, I was straight through school, no breaks, no nothing. I got my master's, straight into work, straight into that. I had kids early. I'm saying that these things don't happen by chance. You have to grow up sometime, right? And take responsibility for your life. You know, what are we trying to do? You know, we're trying to do so much for our kids today that they will never learn to be good adults for themselves.
That's
how
not
we
Yeah,
true.
that
it's
That's
true.
not to the same degree.
I can
Sorry,
certainly
Michael.
buy it. I can certainly buy that, because you're talking about cultures, and if you take a look at the way the Chinese people bring up their children compared to the way Western people bring up their children, you see a vast difference. You see them tackling tasks that are way beyond, from a Western perspective, way beyond their abilities, because those are adult things. No,
Yes.
children can actually do them.
It's
But
not.
sorry, can I add this
Go on.
conversation?
No, we'll give it back to you. It's your conversation, right?
Let's not forget that, yes, you just mentioned what you mentioned, Michael, but there's also a high level of suicide, right? So let's think about it and try to counterbalance it. I understand, as a firstborn, as I mentioned earlier, that people become, I said people, like your first child is your guinea pig, the training wheels, you learn everything. You learn everything. And I understand, and I was looking at Liome's comment. Some children have had to drop out of school to become or to be part of the breadwinning team in their homes at a very young age. And so the way they grow up, the way they end up becoming adults, the way it manifests itself when they're exposed to those traumatic, and often what happens is nothing's explained to that child. You know, this is just life, get on with it. There's no conversation, there's no transition that happens. It just happens. And as I mentioned earlier before I got thrown out, we go through these things in isolation. We think it's just us that's been through this trauma or been through this experience. And the reality is there's so many people out there. 70% of us go through trauma, right? Let's think about that for a moment. We think we're working in isolation until we get into friendships or different groups or school or you know, as you become an adult, university, wherever you find yourself, wherever space you occupy, you begin to realize that you're not the only one going through this. But specifically, when it comes to mothers and first daughters, for some, there is that tension that happens because you are moving, growing, feeling like, where's the rush? And here is another thing I'm going to talk about. One of the things that my friend and I had a conversation, you know, this week, and the reason why this became a topic of discussion is that when it suits parents, you're a child. When it suits them, you're an adult. So that child or that person grows up confused. You know, when it's time for me to go and have a life or be a child, or you have responsibilities. And when there's responsibilities and you become an adult and you're talking like an adult, you're told you're a child. You know, this is other business, don't get involved in it. But I'm an adult, if I'm a child, being an adult in an environment where that really shouldn't be happening. So it becomes quite a confusing time for that firstborn, especially when you have a firstborn, and I'm going to go into the Windrush generation and so on and so forth. Firstborns from, African Caribbean descent and background, who may have been born in one country, left behind, and then they are having to migrate or meet siblings, full siblings in the household, and they hit the ground running, because now coming from back home, you are responsible enough, you are intelligent enough, and you can run a whole household. So here you are, run this household without the transition, right? Without a thought of a new environment for that child and a new place for them to get to know or understand, or get to take the time to settle in and settle down. So this throws up all kinds of trauma. That in itself is I understand it's a different topic, but these are the types of traumas that children going into adolescence and going to adults experience, and in some households you find that the first daughter and the and mother are always in clashes without the younger siblings understanding why that is, and they view it as, oh my God, she's just a rebellious one, which is what happens in homes. Oh, she just rebelled, you know what she's like, and so on and so forth. But the reality is, no one has paused, stopped, taking a moment to understand why that might be. So I'm going to pause for a second.
I was talking to Solomon. I want to acknowledge your comment, my friend. Says, yeah, life is unfortunately not a bed of roses, right? I was talking to someone the other day. So no, where was I? No, friend. When I went to London last week, that's why I can't remember. Coach Ashley, if I see you, it's a good day, or old enough to drive, old enough to be empowered to be an adult. Coach, I'm with you entirely. I agree. Western societies do shelter for a bit too long. Coach, that's me. You and I are sing the same song here. Is that you're never too young to grow up. Grow up. Anyway, see, now I said about Christiana. This friend of mine said to me, "So how's your daughter?" I'm like, I got 2 boys and 1 daughter. Right? I'm like, she's fine. She got married the other day.
Yes, congratulations. Yes.
Of course, I didn't go to her wedding. And she's like, you don't like you don't like daughters. You're sexist. I'm like, I like my sons, and I get on better. Girls are different to sons. This is one thing I think we need to acknowledge, Christiana. Right? I think that's in all cultures. It's not a cultural thing. This is girls have a different way of doing things and looking at things. That I don't know. I know it annoys me. And I don't know what it is. They just have. Some say it's a hormone. Some say.
I'm going to pause you for a second. Why would that be annoying to you? Is the question.
What daughters? As a whole.
You said it's annoying, so I'm asking the question. Why would that be annoying?
Oh, okay. I know. All right. I can only explain it with my 2 granddaughters.
Okay, go ahead.
I got 2 granddaughters and a grandson.
How old are they?
The granddaughter is 16, and the younger one is something like 9.
Okay, there you go.
Right. I leave them be because I can't. I'm not playing that game. You're not my kid. I'm not even gonna bother. You're my daughter's kid. You deal with her. Don't look at me, right? If you come to my house, deal with my wife. She's your grandmom. She's my representative. I refuse to even engage because I just can't. I can't take sulking. I can't take looking at your phone 24/7. I can't take being depressed. I just can't accept any of that stuff. And that's why that's my experience of daughters. So it is passing the trauma of my daughter to them.
I understand that this is not what we're speaking about. I think you're speaking about general upbringing, and I mean, daughters and mothers where the relationship does clash because there are underlying, difficulties, issues that have never really been spoken about, or they felt they've never been allowed to express, and that has gone unaddressed and festered for so many years. You know, that's what the conversation that took place this week brought out. You know, so it's the acknowledgement or the lack of acknowledgement that keeps that tension between both parties. Because ultimately, one person is thinking, the adult is thinking, or the parent is thinking, well, this is normal. I went through that myself. I had to look after my siblings. I have to do X, Y, and Z. You know, why should you be any different? But what I can say is, when it goes back 3-4 generations, that it just passed down from generation to generation without real understanding, without pausing to truly ask questions, right? It's a little bit like telling you a true story that I was told once. There once was a lady who, forever in the day, she would have a whole leg of lamb or a whole salmon, and over Christmas they'll cook dinner. She always cut off the ends, right, and put this food inside the oven. Every Christmas was the same thing. So one day, when she had children, one day her child was growing up enough, and she asked her, Mom, why do you do that all the time? And she says, oh, because my grandmother did the same thing, so did my mum. And I'm now doing the same thing too. She never really understood why they did that. She just saw them do that. But the reason why they did that was because it couldn't fit physically into the oven. No one has stopped to ask the question, but why are you putting it that way? When the daughter asked the question, she said, oh, well, everybody else did it, so I'm doing the same thing. That in itself is generational, right? And that's what I mean by generational trauma, when it's passed down without any understanding, without you being allowed to ask questions, or when the questions come, people feel, you know, you almost ruffle the feathers, because there's never been a time where we've asked questions. I'll give you an example. The conversation that took place is that I couldn't ask, you know, she couldn't ask her mother these questions because her mom didn't question her grandmother. You just did what you were told to do without questioning. You know, respectfully and culturally, you couldn't really question things or challenge things because that's how things were done. And so it just perpetuates the next generation and leaves that trauma, especially when you have real trauma, whether it's the way of being disciplined, or the fact that you had to leave everything behind that you knew about or you know about, or you've been thrown into a situation that you have to hit the ground running. And I can understand when, you know, with Lisa and myself, we were both first of, you know, 6 and 7 children in a household. You overnight become a parent. And I mentioned earlier on, this is known as parentification of children or young people. That role is given to you, or it's inherited. Nobody gets to ask you, do you mind doing this? Or would you mind X, Y, and Z? It's the assumption that is made up, because I went through this, that's what we must go through. We need to start communicating better with our children. You know, we do. Because what tends to happen is you go through that experience, you either, like Annie, you said, you either get up and you leave home earlier from 15, 16, well, actually from 14, 15, 16 and above, you leave home earlier. And then what tends to happen is you spend a whole lifetime, or part of that, your childhood into your adulthood, of a lifetime, displaying and walking around with sometimes lack of confidence, questioning things, self-doubting, and all these things that you go through. Experience trauma that you don't really understand, but it can be traumatic. And I'm going to return to those children who were born elsewhere, brought to meet siblings here without a proper transition period. It is traumatic, you know. Different experiences, and I know life throws different things, you know, different experiences, different challenges, different obstacles at us. But I do believe, as parents and those who are the adults, conversation, communication needs to be the key in hopefully reducing the level of trauma or eradicating the trauma completely. By my conversations over a decade of having these conversations, and I said this to you yesterday, Annie, when we were speaking, that I began to write about this back in 2013. And I've had many conversations with women who are mothers, and I'm speaking about probably my mother's age group, so our parents and grandparents, and then women who are becoming mothers themselves, you know, who have young children. And there is that missing the element of properly communicating, you know, being able to sit down and have difficult conversations, because they are avoided. And what happens is it feeds even more into the trauma that you've experienced. So here's my thing with mothers and daughters. Communication is so important. And I mentioned therapy earlier, because in therapy, you could both be frank and you can have those difficult conversations that you perhaps wouldn't even dare want to have in your household, right? Without feeling like, oh my goodness, am I going to get into trouble? Without carrying guilt, without carrying worry about what if this opens up a can of worms? What if this goes wrong? What if this comes, or my questioning, you know, erupts, an emotion or a buried experience? Trauma, like I said, we carry them from generation to generation, and we just to talk about them. We tend to think if we sweep them under the carpet, it'll sort itself out. It doesn't. It manifests in people's relationships, in their marriages, in different aspects of their life, at work, and so on and so forth. And so, I really wanted to bring this conversation today because it was one that came up in conversation earlier this week. And it just makes sense for us to have this conversation. And I'm now inviting those in the audience to come up on stage and to share what your thoughts, experience, your perspective, your views are. Because it's important. We need to talk about these things. Similarly to what I speak about usually, miscarriage and baby loss, we don't have these conversations, and we need to start having them in communities.
Yeah, look, I can see where you're coming from. Michelle says, definitely, you never wanted to challenge, you didn't want to challenge your parents. I guess speaking as a daughter, an older daughter as well. So, Marcello, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much for being here. Yes. Michelle says she has to go and get grandkids ready for school. Thank you for being talking about this. I hear you. Coach, Coach, it's always a genius in that comment, Coach. He really is. You have an echo, Christiana. I don't know what your echo is. If I try your other self, different Christiana, go and say something.
There you go. No echo.
So shall I remove the other one then? Try again. No, I still can't hear you. Sorry, Christiana.
You can't hear me?
No, not on that one. That's why we have an echo. Don't know why. Anyway, so Coach says, being from Africa, both my kids and my sister grew up quicker within the freedom and sense of responsibilities than our kids. A can-do culture mindset plays a big role. Yeah, look, I think I'm with you that it's it comes down to love and truly parenting with love rather than parenting with any other way. Victor, I see you. Welcome, Victor. Say hello, everyone.
Victor, welcome.
Right. Like I say, I think it's about parenting with love rather than anything else.
So and
having that communication that you mentioned earlier also matters.
Absolutely. So when you think about it, recently I read a post that spoke about unpaid work for every single day when it comes to first daughters or first children and their parents is quantified as unpaid work, and the reality is that's true. And also is that thing of the value that this has been valued at 10.8 trillion, right? Someone's taken the time to do all this research and pieced it together. But here is what I want to talk about. It's the impacts, the mental impacts, the emotional impacts, the toil it takes on both parties, but let's look at it from a daughter's perspective. The experience of high anxiety, the need for perfection, wanting to have everything perfect because you haven't quite done that thing right, or not being good enough when you are given these tasks and you want to accomplish them, or being so responsible that you forget that not everybody's going to be like you and have the ability. That itself features in a work environment where you are so capable and adept at adapting that you miss those that perhaps are not the same way, right? But that feeds into when you're going to workspaces, the guilt over setting boundaries. When you become an adult and you want to set boundaries within you and your mother, you start to feel guilty because you're like, oh my goodness, my mom, how do I do this? And but the reality is we need to set boundaries. Otherwise you live in internal turmoil. That's what happens. The struggles with your identity when it comes to adulthood. These are the things that research tells us happens, or how this type of trauma, generational trauma of this nature, manifests itself. It's important for me, and it's a conversation I've been having for such a long time that it had to feature. So I'm not citing mothers here. Let's look at mothers too. For mothers, some of them carry a huge amount of guilt. It's guilt of this is how I was raised. How do I find the balance? For some mothers, they've come from, whether it's poverty, whether it's war, whether it's domestic abuse. They need someone around them. They need somebody to support them. And often that firstborn daughter is the support, is a person they want to connect with. So in some cases, and I speak about those who were separated at birth with their mothers and then reunited, there is that pull of the bond not being as strong as it can be, and then it being viewed as the daughter is being rebellious because they should be grateful, right? So it's really important when we are looking at this. We need to look at, yes, both parties, but there has to be conversation, there has to be communication, effective communication, there has to be listening. That's the conversation that we had this week within this thread of conversations. Is both parties need to listen, or at least the adult. Similarly, the mother needs to listen to how that person, whether the young person or whether the now an adult, how they feel, how they felt growing up, and to not be trivialized and to not be dismissed as in, well, we all do this, so what's your problem? In reality, there needed to be a proper transition conversation that happens, and that most of the time doesn't happen. It doesn't. What that leaves, or what that does is it creates insecurities. It creates, things like depression, and it creates stress, unnecessary stress, anxiety, which I've mentioned previously, and it can sometimes really break the family dynamics, family relationship when it comes to siblings. For the siblings are like, what's wrong with this person? They're all okay, we'll get on with mom. Why can't you just get on? Why are you always the outsider, or the outlaw, the outlaw in the family, or the rebellious one, which can then lead to either separation, estrangement, or unsettlement amongst siblings. And if you're anything like Lisa or myself, who are one of first of 6 or 7 children, you can imagine what that's going to look like, as we grow and become adults. And so it's important, but again, I understand that mothers are sometimes operating from a survival perspective. Perhaps they're in a new country, they're trying to navigate their own selves in a new environment, whilst trying to also navigate being a parent, being a mother, or being a household unit in a new environment. So I'm going to pause there for a moment. I'm going to go over to Michael if he's around. I missed some of your perspective because I was offline. I was offline, being being thrown off. Um, so it'd be good for you to chime in.
All right. Um, can you hear me? Is the first question, Christiana?
I can, yes.
Okay, excellent. Um, this is very interesting, and you missed quite a bit initially when you left. I did chime in to help any out, and also to help
Thank you.
the yeah, to help the audience, understand, I guess, what we're trying to talk about and just bring it out. I am My family is rather different. It's not, and I can say that because initially I thought I was just, I had a mother and a father. Yes. I didn't know my stepmom. My stepmom was my stepmom. I had no idea for 50 years that she was my stepmom. I thought she was my mom. So it was only at the age of 50 that I was told that, you came from a different mother. It's like, what? What are you talking about? Yeah, but anyway, but I was the oldest in the entire family. Um, and then followed me with two twin sisters. Those two twin sisters, now, when I come to look at the subject that you're talking about and understanding it, I come from a different mom, okay? And they come from this mom, and they were treated different than. And when I left the house, I was the one who was getting all the instructions and everything, like what's going on, what needs to be done. She was giving it to all of us, but I was the one who was actively getting things done, making sure that everything was done, because I did not want the repercussions. I just did not want them, and I knew what they were, and I knew how they would come about if things were not done correctly. So I did it. Yes, lo and behold, I spoiled the little ones because I was being responsible, and I knew that I was the one who was going to be checked and told, why didn't you make sure that these things got done? And it was my responsibility because that's what she always say. When I left the house, that fell to my twin sisters that followed me, and she treated both of them differently. Um, and I was not aware of that until, of course, 50 years later, because we start talking about these things. And, certain other things also transpired before then, and that was in regards to my one of the twin sisters divorced themselves from the family. They didn't like what was she just
Sorry, but that's common, Michael, as well.
I thought it just happened in my family. I was like, what? I had never even heard it. I never seen it. I was like, what the heck is that? And she
Hmm.
said she did it. I was like, oh
It's
my
common.
gosh, it was unbelievable. And the second one, who was first twins, she was the first to come out, supposedly the first to come out from my mom. She doesn't talk to my mom at all. She's completely disrespected her, and she's told my dad that she doesn't want anything to do with her. And so this has created a really huge problem within the family because now my dad has even written in a letter indicating that you are no longer my child because you're disrespecting my wife, you're disrespecting me, and you need to come. And he's trying to go back to traditional ways. And these daughters were not brought up in the traditional manner. More than half of their time, they were brought up in British schools. They were sent to British schools. And that's where they developed their culture or saw a different type of culture. And they adopted that because they preferred what was at home. Every time they'd come back home, they'd say they're miserable. And that's what they were internally telling me, of course, 50 years later. So, well, it's 50 to me, but for them, it's more like 45, 42 years later. It's that is what you're actually talking about, is that, and then I take a look at my mom and I try to backtrack what went on in her family, and she's made, and to the younger ones, she's told them about, what happened, in their family, because they inquired and asked, etc. And so she decided to talk about it bit by bit. And so you tend to get a glean of how they used to live, and how what used to happen in their houses, and how their mother used to treat them. And it's just like, oh my gosh, yes, generational trauma. It's actually being transferred. And not only is it being transferred, it's she hasn't gotten out of it. She has no way of knowing that what she's done is actually transferred that trauma. She's transferring that trauma into her kids. And now the
Absolutely.
kids who are not not brought up in the culture, in our culture, are actually brought up in the British culture, have a problem with that transfer. And so they're rejecting it. And that rejection is by saying, no, I refuse to take this. And that is what has brought about this miscommunication, and not only miscommunication, but this kind of like abandonment from the culture. And the parents are saying, if you abandon our culture, you abandon us, blah 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 blah. So it's like, huh? That's not what they're saying. There's this miscommunication, and of course, all the relatives are trying to chime in, but all the relatives are doing is actually looking at this like a real TV show, trying to figure out who's gonna fall next, what's gonna happen next. It's kind of like an exciting show for them, a real show. It's
Yeah.
drama. That's what it is. Our family is drama, so they love it, and they're eating it up, and sometimes they instigate it and create even more problems.
Mhm.
So that's what you're running into. You can run into as well. And I'm pretty sure there are a lot of families who are running into that kind of situation right there. But Christiana, what you're talking about and what you brought up, I like it. So continue and go with what I have presented you in terms of material. If there's anything that you have in there, I'll chime in and add some more if you need. But go with it.
Hold on. Let me work now. Thanks, Michael. Let me welcome Curtis. Good morning, everyone. Says Curtis. I'm glad you're here, my friend. So I mentioned that last room had something similar to this. Was Curtis talking about mothers and sons, the traumas they pass on, and I was totally with him on that day as well. Because I think there's something unique about mothers and the relationship with their kids. Full stop. Christiana, I'm sure we can see you, but no, we can't hear you. We can't see you at all now. Welcome, Curtis. Glad you're here. Dr. CJ, I see you on stage, my friend.
Can you hear
Welcome,
me?
welcome, welcome. I can hear you. Christiana, you sound like an alien. Go try again. Christiana,
Can you
try
hear
again.
me?
We can hear you, but there's a whistling behind your sound. Let's go to Dr. CJ, and then we'll come back to you, Christiana. Dr. CJ, how are you doing?
Good morning. It's been a hot minute. Thank you so
I
much for
tell you,
inviting
what,
me.
it's a minute anyway, right? That's hot one or cold one. It's been a minute, right? I'm glad you're here.
Dr.
Yeah.
CJ, a
Hi.
complete surprise. I've never been on a stage with you, so I'm just so ecstatic. I'm a
Dr.
fan.
Peter,
Oh,
can you
I
hear
love
me?
you, Dr. CJ.
Can
I
you guys
just really
hear
want to
me?
say that.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you now. It's better now, so that's a better sound, Christiana.
Dr. CJ, it's been a minute.
I know it's been crazy. My life's been crazy, and this discussion is near and dear to me. In the last, I
Hmm.
would say, 2 months, guys, I've been struggling, to be honest with you, emotionally, mentally exhausting. My grandmother died, and
Oh
because
no.
of that, and this is actually appropriate for this conversation this morning about trauma and their daughters. Um, as you guys know, if you don't, I've been abandoned as a baby, right? Like my parents left me with my grandmother, and I've been bullied growing up because Asian kids tells you like, oh, you don't have parents that love you. You are a kid from a bamboo shoot, because I was very skinny too growing up. And come to find out, I would say about a month ago, and I'm still kind of struggling with it, that my grandmother was, well, okay, let me go back in 2 minutes. I try to be as quick as possible, but basically, my grandmother was born in Hawaii. Her family is well to do. They had a pineapple farm and everything. But her mom found Seventh-day Adventist to be an amazing journey for her faith. So she decided to sell all of their possessions in Hawaii and move themselves to the Philippines to spread the word of God. And my grandmother has 7 sisters and 1 brother. And so they bought everything, they sold everything, everybody's ready to go. And part of that checkup to get exit America is a health check. They found out that my grandmother had tuberculosis at age 10. Age 10, okay, keep that in mind. And my grandmother said, okay, well, the family's ready to go. So they decided to leave my grandmother at age 10 at a sanitarium. Okay? This is hard. She got raped every day for 7 years until age of 17. I did not know that about my grandmother until she died. And I didn't know why she's been married 5 times. And so I know the history, but it's really hard. And then my grandmother's cousin, who's her best friend, basically said, I didn't know my sisters or my brother. And apparently her older brother hated her. He was supposed to visit her, but he never did visit her. Okay, remember, guys, age 10. And I realized that's a lot to carry. My daughters actually heard this at church. And even the priest who was reciting that, he looked very shocked and heavy hearted. My uncle is the one who shared this story in front of everybody to tell that even at her last breath, she didn't give up on her faith. She said when she's sad, when she feels abandoned, she feels all of these things, she goes to her faith to feel that warmth. And my kids looked at me and started crying, and I'm getting emotional. Anyway, I found out from her cousin that her moms, like literally probably 5th generation, all abandoned their kids one way or another. And my uncle, who's 60 something, took me to lunch the day after funeral and said, I don't know what to do. I still feel abandoned by my mom and she's already gone. And I don't want to transfer that feeling of abandonment, because you're always going to carry that even if you forgive your parents. I have a good relationship with my mom now, even though she left me. Didn't know her until at age 7. I saw her for 12 hours, and then at age 18, when I was already here in America. And I met when I was 13, and I left the house at 18. But the trauma that you pass on to your family doesn't have to happen. You have to be cognizant of it and break the cycle, right? And all my parents, grandparents, everybody literally got babies at age 17. And I got mine at age 25 or 26, right? So I break that cycle. I haven't abandoned my kids. And I have 2 adults this year already. So I think I did it okay. But trauma from family is heavy. And you have to be intentional on your journey. And that's what I'm doing right now, is trying to heal and not carry that trauma on my shoulder, because it's been heavy for the last 2 months. So thank you for this space. I appreciate you guys so much.
Dr. CJ, thank you so much for that share. And I'm going to say I'm so sorry to hear about your story. You know, I try and bring conversations that are real, that people can come and feel comfortable to tell their story, because your story could literally change a life, save a life, and help somebody else. And I mentioned earlier about you may be going through something in isolation, believing you're the only one going through that something. It's until you speak to somebody else or somebody else speaks to you that you learn more about yourself and your journey. And you are going about it the right way. It's about breaking the generational trauma. It really is. I hear you speak about, your mom leaving, and I'm so sorry about your grandmother. and what she went through as she was speaking, I had to really pause and, take a breath, because that is a lot in itself. That's the other thing as well. We experience trauma vicariously. It may not have been directly to us, but through others, through family trauma that happens, that we absorb, not realizing that that is what's happening to us when it does happen, or as it's happening to us. Some of us have gone through the experience. What is common, the common thread is leaving home quite earlier on. Seems to be one of the most common action that comes out of it, because you want to change of environment. You want to get to understand yourself. You want to form your own identity. You want to understand really what's happening. And sometimes you may not understand it all, but allowing yourself to come away from the space and environment gives you that time and gives you the opportunity to begin to understand and begin the healing process before even speaking with the adults or the mothers or the parents that are still alive and wanting to have a further, a better understanding, if they choose to, broach the subject or discuss the subject. Because again, sometimes that's the issue. We have parents and adults who do not want to engage in conversation for so many different reasons, which further traumatizes us because of the response you get from them. So I brought this to the table because it was a conversation that began during ladies' lunch, and it really left me thinking, where can I take this to and have that conversation? Another thing is I began writing about this back in 2013 and paused for a moment, and I've paused since then up until this point, because I wanted to understand, and I wanted to speak to other women and other mothers and other sisters and brothers and just other human beings as to what their experiences have been and how they have navigated this experience, this trauma. What does that look like for you on a daily basis? I mentioned some of the ways in which it shows up. The need for perfection is one way that it shows up. The heightened anxiety is another way that it shows up. The need to want to sometimes please others. Some people look at it as manipulation, but I always say be mindful of labeling that particular, behavior manipulation, because it may be coming from trauma of a different kind. So again, it's really having to understand that. Some have told me they have, mothers who appear or who behave in a jealous manner, so they're jealous of them, and they're having to really ask other family members to understand the person in front of them. Why is this and why is this happening? So I want to thank you again, Dr. CJ, for sharing your story and your such a heartfelt story. I pray that you find, and again, I'm going to start by saying my condolences for your loss. I pray that you really get to find ways, hoping that your family having that conversations and being open, to answering questions will set you on a path of truly getting a better understanding. Because it's such a difficult and complex area. At times, the complexities out of our control, and at times, the complexities that are unnecessary. And it's not a judgment thing. So, again, having this conversation today, it's not about judging anybody. It's really bringing to the table a conversation that, just like I speak about miscarriage and baby loss, it's a conversation that can sometimes be difficult to have. And yet, it's so vital, so important that we have these conversations. So I'm going to pause there for a moment and ask Annie to see if we have any questions, any comments that I perhaps have missed, because I know I've been off online this afternoon with technology being great. Being great. Yes. So thank you again for your contribution.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. CJ. Condolences as well for your grandmother. Thank you.
Sorry, Annie. Dr. CJ, let's try and arrange a time to jump on a call and have a conversation. So I'm hoping that we can do that. And also we're long overdue too. So let's have a conversation, please. Thank you.
Yeah, that would really be great. Yeah, I actually learned boundaries about 12 months ago. And
Great.
also asking for help. I have a hard time asking for help, and I've learned to ask for help, and also learn to be present, to be here, to be now,
Yes.
because it gives me less anxiety when I don't think about the future.
Mhm.
However, I have ADHD, so I have like I have a struggle inside where I have the need to structure, but I also
Mm.
have a need to a to-do list in my head. So I try to be very, very intentional on like not taking that part of me over. And
Hmm.
so I have a lot of like journey going through, and I like structure. So I am a CBT coach practitioner, certified. So I'm trying to put that on myself and said, let me explore how this emotions, right now is making me feel. And it's been very helpful. So yeah, we do need to talk though, because it is long overdue.
With yes, and I like what you said there when you said it's really about self-reflection for you to be able to to combat the remnants of trauma of this nature is it's really self-reflection. It's really having to reflect to understand that you need boundaries to be firmly in place and to understand what those boundaries look like. That could be something like not engaging in certain conversations that are triggering, that could set you back and to bring you back into that frame of mind. Um, as a child, so there are so many ways of looking at this, but I always say we need to have the difficult conversations. Not all parents or all mothers are open to that because it means, and as have been told from conversations with others, is we don't mothers some of their mothers have not really valued or allowed the mirror to be held up to them, because that in itself, it's way too much to handle. It's having to look at all the things that you've believed or you thought that you were doing, right, or you believe genuinely to be the right way to parent. It's now being called into question. Not that we're calling it into question, but it's really for us to understand and to be able to move forward. Because, like I mentioned earlier, this feeds into our life at home, our life at work, with our colleagues, and so on and so forth. Nobody gets to any environment and refuse to be themselves, or you do not get to your work environment and say, "Hey, I'm just going to set my trauma aside at the door and walk into work, have a great day, and I'm going to pick up my trauma and go home after that." That is not what happens, you know, because we are human beings and because we're living, breathing human beings. Those traumas will feature when there is a trigger in the environment that we and the spaces that we occupy. So that's the reason why I'm speaking about this, because I think it's far too important, um, of a thing to just be silent about. And also, there are those who are perhaps experiencing this and asking themselves, or self-doubting, or experiencing low self-esteem, lack of confidence, you know, powerless to speak, and for some in fear. Let's talk about it. Let's help each other. Let's help you guys to truly have the voice and have the audacity, actually, I'm going to say, have the audacity that you get to have the conversation, you get to voice out how things made you feel. Because one of the other things from a cultural perspective is where children are neither heard or seen. And when you're experiencing this in a household, you almost cannot speak or voice. And Michael touched on what I'm saying earlier when he was speaking about himself and his twin siblings, to the extreme and to the point where that sibling or that daughter or that first daughter chooses to estrange themselves from the entire family. The downside is because of the lack of communication, the lack of um, openness.
Our disease has struck again, Christiana. You've lost your sound. Suddenly miming again. Have no idea why you're suddenly miming. I tell you, tech has been playing up today in a big way. I was going to leave it to you to carry on, but oh my goodness. Anyway, my friends, Michael, is there anything you want to add? So I'll let you and Dr. CJ add what you want to add, and then we'll probably call it a day and bring the conversation back another day. And now, I think Dr. CJ, I agree with you. It's about breaking the chain and breaking the cycle. It has to be, right? I think that's really what we have to do. Alas, you
Hi,
know,
I'm back.
that's not how it is, right? Go on then. Say that. Say that. Michael's ready to speak. Michael, talk to us.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what Dr. Christiana and what Dr. CJ, actually, their names begin with a C. Yeah, interesting. Dr. C's or C squared, Dr. C squared. Okay, I don't know. I just love the double C's. That's pretty cool. Um, they brought up something that is particularly it's like a poison within our respective cultures, and we need to obviously these are things that we should not be transferring on to our um, children, uh, and we need to find ways to not only not transfer them but also to communicate what has happened and why things have happened and why they transpired the way they did. There are things that we cannot change the past, but we can change the future, and we can do that immediately. We do not have to wait on this. This is something you don't wait on. This is something you act upon, and you act upon right away. It is pernicious, and it affects not only yourself but also affects everybody around you. So your entire being, your rhythm, the way you move in the universe is affected by these traumas. So dealing with them and dealing with them effectively, I think makes you a better person at the end of the day, and puts you in a better place. And I mean, focusing on you, puts you and your children in a better place for the future. That's about where I stand right now. It's going to be a struggle. It's not going to be easy. It's definitely going to be a struggle. So be prepared for it too.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. I think that's a great point. It really is. One key thing I'm going to say is it takes and begins with acknowledging on both sides. Acknowledging that what's happened has happened, understanding each other's perspective, by allowing for the space and the time and the pace to have those discussions that may seem very difficult, and learning compassion, bringing that compassion on board, and then helping each other to set clear boundaries, no matter how difficult it is, respecting those boundaries. And I can say, especially from mother to daughter, respecting the boundaries is so important, because that forms part and parcel of the healing process. And the language that we use, it's so important. So in situations like this, language can sometimes become dismissive without either party intentions to do so. And that's why it's important to really take the time to listen. Don't make assumptions or think, here we go again. before we move forward, I took the time to pen this down. So I'd like to read you some words, spoken words, which I kept thinking about this journey, my friend's journey, my own journey, the journeys of some of the women that I've, had the privilege and be fortunate and blessed enough to communicate and to hear their stories. It's the healing between mothers and first daughters. So it goes like this. I was born with her fire in my bones, but didn't know that fire could burn me too. She, my mother, wore silence like perfume and shame like foundation, always flawless, always crackling beneath. I learned to walk on broken eggshells and expectations, braiding her sacrifices into the strands of my hair, tight, painful, proud. She said I was too loud when I asked questions, too much when I showed feelings, too soft when I cried, too strong when I didn't. But truth, she was scared of my shine, not because she hated it, but because the world told her she could never keep hers. And that pain, oh, that ancient aching pain, got passed down like recipes without love. Just the heat, just the hunger. They don't tell you how envy can sit at the dinner table wearing your mother's face, how jealousy can sound like advice, how your own reflection can become a battlefield. But there's what they never told us. Hurt is inherited, but so is healing. We are allowed to rewrite the story in our mother tongues, not with curses, but with compassion. I said, let the envy become empathy. Let the comparison become connection. Let the bruises become blueprints. Let the silence become songs we sing together. Mama, I see now you didn't know love without survival, but I do. I will. I will take the ashes of our anger, the splinters of your silence, and build a bridge where we once built walls. I forgive you for not knowing what to do with me. I forgive you for not expecting you to. Let's not waste another generation fighting mirrors. Let's dance in them. Let's teach our daughters how to hold fire without getting burned. Because this time, we're not just survivors, we are alchemists, turning pain into purpose, wounds into wisdom, trauma into truth. And that is how first daughters become the last to carry the curse. Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much for being here, sharing this discussion, contributing to this discussion. I say this every time we have this show. I don't take you guys being here for granted. I don't take this community for granted. I love you guys for your compassion, for your understanding, for being here, for taking the time and choosing to be with us despite your busy schedule. So thank you so much. I'm going to use the mic for now and pass on the mic to Annie and hopefully to Dr. CJ too, and Michael. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the space. Michael, I kind of heard towards the end of your share, and actually that happens on my dad's side about, it's complicated right now, but family, the first set of children treats the other children from another mom differently. And my dad has to be the hero of that family to say, no, we're all blood related. And I think it's really about rejection, to be honest with you, right? I build myself and my platform because of abandonment and rejection.
Mm.
Growing up, always constantly rejected or being bullied and not having a mentor has been difficult. But that's the reason why I'm only one person, but I'm going to try until my last breath to be there for the people who felt like me, who felt abandoned, who not just felt it, but really have it, right? And sometimes, even if you're not abandoned as a child and you feel that abandonment anyway now as an adult, it doesn't make your trauma less. It doesn't make anything less. But I think my point is you can't help others if you're
Mm.
only giving advice, but you're not taking your own advice. And it's been very difficult taking my own advice, but I've been trying to really align myself so that if I'm strong, then my energy and my vibe and everything that I do will be stronger for others as well, and for everybody that comes after me. And of
Mm.
course, my two daughters to not carry the weight that I have and try to change that. And I have not, five generations or six generations actually abandoned their children. And I cut that line. So I'm very proud of that line. Thank you so much for the space today, Christiana, Annie, and Michael. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for inviting me, Annie.
Thank you, Dr. CJ. And I'm so proud of you for breaking the cycle because it needs to be done. And you sound so much happier for it. So congratulations to you for doing so. Thank you for sharing once again on this stage. And as you know, you're always welcome. I feel like we've been around this since LinkedIn audio.
Yeah, the reason because I still drop my kids off in the morning, so it's really hard for me. But now it's summer school, so I have time in the morning. So that's why.
Yay. Thank you. So Annie, we've got 8 minutes. I also want to say thank you to, yes, Curtis, thank you so much. And
That is
thank you so
very
much.
nice. That was your spoken words. I don't know what to call it. Story poem.
Yes, my spoken words titled Unlearned. So it was
Mm,
about unlearning love. So unlearned love.
that's it. And as Coach Ashif says, yes, Christiana, we repeat what we don't repair. So
Mm.
I think it takes us back to that point about breaking this cycle. And I think that's it's partly a parenting conversation. I know you say it's not exactly, but I think it's partly that. It's also partly parenting with love, with the good intentions. So
Absolutely.
that said, our children take things the way they do. I've got three of them. They're three different beasts. I'm lucky to have the nice one that's the youngest for now.
That's
I'll
not
let you
true.
know. I'll let you know how it goes. No, he's the loveliest of all of them. I would say that.
He's a
But
baby
then,
of the house. That's why the babies of the house watch the rest and they find their way and they
mm,
learn from their elders of the older siblings. That's what
mm,
happens. I'm the first of six. In fact, I can say this very clearly and confidently. I was the first of 8 or 9. Sorry, the last born in a household where there were 8 of us before I became the first of 6. And when you are a baby of the house, you look at others, you have your role models, you have those you look up to. And so there's a way of being, you're easygoing and so on and so forth. And then you you move across to a new household and you become the first. You hit the ground running at before you turn a teenager. so, so I've had both worlds. And I can tell you that your son is the way he is because he is the last born. Others have come and done and had that, whatever their upbringing is, they've experienced it. They've shielded him from whatever it was that he would have gone through being a firstborn. I can tell you that for free. So your son is going to be easygoing and chilled out because he's the baby. That's what happens. Think about it. When parents begin with the first child, by the time they get to child 6, 7, or child 8, or in my husband's case, he's the last of 10. By the time they get to him, that energy of whether it's confrontation or whether it's discipline, the discipline styles changes because they've had to learn from child 1 to child 10. And so by this time they're chilled. They're like, cool, whatever happens. Let his siblings deal with him. We're gonna rest. And that's what happens.
I agree with that. As I say, it's a difficult issue. I don't know, beyond what we've said, so breaking the trauma, I guess, getting support, having those conversations between mothers and daughters, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Where else can we really go?
That's
my way of asking. What's going to be in episode 2 of this?
Say that again.
What's going to be in episode 2 of this conversation?
I think episode 2 is really hearing from those who also have gone through it, but it's understanding how that features as an adult in the spaces we occupy, whether that be in your marriage, whether that's in a workspace, because we kind of discussed that this exists. The conversation is about it existing and, what happens, what it looks like from the daughter's perspective, a little bit from the mother's perspective. But I would like us to discuss that from a mother's perspective in part 2, and what that does, how that features in a work environment, how they adapt in working situations. So for example, somebody who, as a result of this trauma, embodies perfectionism, what does that look like in your workspace, in your friendships? So that would be part 2.
Let's talk about it. Let's thank our friends, and hopefully you still got a son.
Yes.
You, I hope. Given that we've overstayed our welcome by a long way, by an hour and 15 minutes, Christiana.
So I had to make arrangements when I realized I was going to be kicked off.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, and don't have your kids constantly on their phones. Yeah, I say that. I agree with you, Michelle. Just saying. Hashtag. Thank you so much, everyone. You can't be your phone forever, Christiana. You got things to do. Thank you so much, everyone. Dr. CJ, Michael, especially. You're stars today for sure. Of course, Christiana. You're
Thank you guys. Bye.
We appreciate you. Dr. CJ, I'll send you a message.
Thank you. Take care. Have a wonderful day.
Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Every step forward is a new beat to your drama. She's success with Global.Media.com and celebrate it with or without champagne or rum. She's success with Global.Media.com. Every step forward is a new beat to your drama. Chase success.